Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Waste Talk series. I have a special guest with me today who works for both at stage and in soil. She creates theater to educate people to work for her soil. She comes from a farm family and she has masters in environmental studies. She has been creating theater for over 50 years and recently completed a massive national tour of Canada, even performing for Canadian Senate, her one-woman show about regenerative farming and climate change. I met her here in Edmonton during her new show designed to fill the gap between urban and suburban audiences. Welcome, Dale. Welcome to my channel. How are you doing today? Tell me more about yourself and your new show.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on your wonderful podcast program. You gave a few details, but I could say also that the kind of theater I did for about 30 or 40 years was primarily community engaged theater. So that means helping communities tell their own stories, their history, and their contemporary issues. And I studied it in England with the Galway Theatre Trust. And this kind of theater is really more about community development as it is about theater. And so that means that we invite anybody who wants a part gets a part. So it's like inclusive casting. So often the casts are quite large. For instance, in my home community in 1990, when we did such a project, we had about 120 people come out for casting. So that makes it kind of crazy, but good. And so we just adjust the script accordingly. So that kind of theater with an all-inclusive cast is obviously very different from what I'm doing now because I'm doing a one-woman show. So I wrote and I'm producing and acting in this show that's called The Gardener and the Golfer. And it's basically a conversation to like a recorded voice between a gardener, myself, and a man who is, well, for one thing, an avid golfer, but he also has a very suburban kind of conventional concept of lawn care. And really knows nothing about the importance of native plants or composting or, soil health. So essentially, that's kind of the mechanism by which it gives me the opportunity to tell him about some of these things. So in the process of the play, the progress of the play, he learned some things, but I, as in the gardener, also opened my mind to, someone who's very different from myself. So I think in this point in time in history, the way the world's going, that's a particularly important thing to be able to do, to have a productive and non-hostile conversation with someone whose worldview you don't share. Yeah, so it started off actually as my master's project. I took a 45-year break from university, and I think you mentioned I got my master's in environmental studies at York University in Toronto, near where my farm family lives. And so York University is very open to how you present your final dissertation or your thesis or your final project. So I proposed a one-woman show, and they agreed to that. And so a very early iteration of the show began as my master's project. And then I got a chance to go to the United Nations Climate Change, and then the following year in Glasgow, Scotland, and I got a chance to perform, this early version of my show in the streets and at fringe venues in both Madrid and Glasgow. So that's kind of how, sort of the genesis of the play took place.
So that's interesting to know that this is part of your master's. Yeah, so you recently completed your master's, right? You just took this degree.
Well, in 2022, yeah. Okay. COVID kind of got in the way, and I actually ended up performing my one-woman show as my final dissertation, remotely, like as a, a Zoom call. So wasn't ideal, but yes, I did graduate, and then, I set off on this national tour with the latest version of the play.
Yeah, well, congratulations for that. And that was a wonderful conversation between you and the golfer. Before the show, I was wondering, how will you do that? but that was a great idea to talk to a phone, and that was awesome.
Want to fly your drone over my property anymore. To be frank, it feels like an invasion of my privacy.
Okay, honey, calm down.
Okay, Bill, first of all, I'm not your honey.
We often hear the term soil extinction, and I also heard in your show about the gardener and the golfer. Can you tell me more about this? What is this soil extinction?
Well, soil scientists say that if we don't, that we will run out of topsoil in about 60 years if we carry on the way we are. But I always like to sort of hasten to add that I really do feel optimistic that there is a movement in regenerative agriculture, which of course puts soil health, front and center. So I like to think that we're at the edge of the abyss, so to speak, but that we can still pull back and, correct the mistakes of, the last thousands of years, really, where people have, ever since agriculture was invented, have tilled the soil. And of course, it's the tillage that really has the most negative impact on the soil health because it destroys the microbial networks, which are essential to plant health. And it exacerbates erosion and doesn't and drought because it doesn't and it doesn't sequester carbon, like whole carbon in the soil. So there's so many reasons not to do tillage. So yeah, that's the phrase soil extinction, relates to all of that. But I like to say, we're not there yet. And I think it's entirely possible that we can, correct course. After having toured across the country, and I've been invited to perform and sometimes present also at some soil conferences, like one in Saskatchewan and an international soil conference in Winnipeg. And these soil scientists are brilliant and they so know their work and they have studied it, PhD level stuff, right? And, they all agree that tillage is really such a detrimental practice. But I also, not just at soil conferences, also at, farming conferences, really seeing a lot more farmers. And, part of my goal is to also try to increase the number of urban gardeners and just urban people in general who are aware of, the crisis point that we're at with soil health. So I'm feeling actually quite optimistic about it.
Yeah. But 60 years is a scary number
It
of years.
is, isn't it?
We will not be
Yeah.
able to grow anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And, of course, climate change is, as it gets worse, and, anyway, I don't want to be too, kind of negative, but, it's because we have all of the tools and all of the solutions to climate change. We just need to implement them.
So, yeah,
So,
before you go into the solution, tell me
yes.
how soil extinction affect climate change.
Well, they're certainly connected in the sense that climate change brings about not necessarily, it used to be called kind of global warming, but that's just a piece of it. It means extreme weather now. And so, if you have unhealthy soil conditions because of tillage and because of overuse of fertilizer and herbicides and pesticides, chemical inputs, then when the extreme weather comes, it's just like a recipe for an inability or seriously impacting our ability to grow food. So yeah, the two are certainly intertwined.
Yeah, so these droughts, wildfires, all these are related to
Mm-hmm.
this. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, sometimes a controlled wildfire or fire, like indigenous people did pre-colonial times and are starting to, do again. It can actually be good for soil and for the natural cycle of things, but obviously not when they're, out of control wildfires that have been brought about by human error or human impact on the planet. So
So soil extinction also, or soil degradation, maybe that is also
Sure.
a term,
Yeah.
also affects the food quality, like nutrients in the
Yes.
food quality. Can you
Mhm.
tell me how does it affect? Do we need to eat more? Like how
Mm.
much nutrients do we get when the soil is
Yes.
degraded?
Yes. No, it's a very good question. That definitely, again, soil scientists, food scientists have clearly proven. Like, I like to rely on peer-reviewed, scientific information, right? Like, I don't get my information from, random sources on the internet or, YouTube, or not YouTube. Well, YouTube too, sure. There's all kinds of stuff out there, but, Instagram and Facebook, etc. So what these scientists are saying is that uh, the soil and it's, of course, the quality, the health of the soil is very related to the health of the food that it can produce. That if the soil is degraded, lacking certain things, certain elements. I am not a soil scientist, just to be clear, so I'm not even going to try to go into, the details of it. But there's some wonderful work out there that, of course, is available online that if people really want to dig into, so to speak, the science of it. But the overview of it is, the bottom line is that the degraded soil produces degraded food in terms of nutrition. And so that means that, there's studies that have been done that prove that the nutrient value of food, say 40 years ago, compared to now, is, I don't have the statistics at the top of in my brain, but is, has been definitely lessened. So that means that even when we are eating food, that even if it's local food and even if it's grown without chemicals, that just the soil itself, unless it's a regenerative farm or garden where the soil has, is in a healthy state, we're getting less nutrition, which of course is not not a piece of good news either.
Yeah, that's right. And so you already said we are doing some work, and of course, there are solutions to solve this problem. But
Yes.
before we dive into that, let's have a rapid fire round. Are you ready
Okay.
for that?
Sure. I guess. Yes, I
Okay.
am.
Okay, so my first question is dirt or soil?
Oh, definitely soil. Yes. Dirt indicate. Should I just do like quick little
Sure,
answers?
yeah, you can
Okay.
elaborate on that.
I feel strongly soil, not dirt.
Awesome. A favorite soil dwelling creature? The
Oh,
creature in
creature.
the
Oh,
soil?
earthworms. Yes.
Earthworms, of
Particularly the
course.
native earthworms as compared to the European variety that were brought over
Mhm.
here with colonizers. Yes.
Biggest threat to soil today?
Biggest threat. Let me see. Well, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm going to say public education
Yeah,
so that more
of
people
course.
know about the
Yeah.
importance of it. Yes.
Number one vegetable to grow.
Number one vegetable that I like to grow. Potatoes.
Awesome. Chemical fertilizers, yay or nay?
Well, I would say nay, but I think there's a time and a place for very, restricted, careful use.
Awesome. Best way to start a soil conversation.
Well, I think through theater.
Yeah, of course. Will we save the soil in time?
Yes, as I said, I'm optimistic we will.
Yes, of
Yes.
course. One thing to stop doing today.
Ooh, one thing to stop doing today. If you're growing food, yeah, tillage. I come back to tillage.
You already mentioned
Yep,
that.
exactly. Cover crops, mulching. Yeah.
Yes. So you answered all the questions very well.
Oh, that's great. I'm not. It wasn't very rapid fire. I was giving longer answers, but anyway, those are my thoughts. Those are my responses.
Okay. So let's talk about the solutions today. You already
Yes.
mentioned that some work is being done. So can you please tell me like what is being done? Little bit about it.
Okay. Well, more and more farmers, even large scale farmers, I suppose, they might be called ranchers, even, who um, uh, own, farm thousands of acres, really are. Obviously, I can't make a blanket statement and say all of them are on board with this, but there are a lot of them who were sitting on the fence. I am finding at these agricultural conferences, and what colleagues are telling me is that more farmers really are understanding the importance of soil health, even if their motivations are financial, which sometimes they are, because it has been clearly proven that you actually farmer can make more dollars per acre by treating the soil well. No cost for chemical inputs, for instance, which are only going to get more expensive because they're all petroleum, gas and oil industry based, or most of them. I don't understand the science of it, but certainly there's a big tie-in to the oil and gas industry in terms of chemical fertilizers. So, yeah, I would say that if we can, just minimize the use of those while farmers transition to regenerative, because you can't suddenly say, farmer with, 5 kids or 2 kids or no kids, whatever, they can't suddenly have, no income. You can't tell them you must go regenerative next spring. It takes time to transition. And the soil itself takes time to rebuild. This is a statistic or a piece of information that a soil scientist told me that, isn't great news, in the sense that it can take up to 9 years for tilled soil that is degraded and has, been subjected to chemical fertilization. It can take up to 9 years for it to really, rebuild and get the kind of microbial activity that in the aggregated soil, as they call it, that's dark and kind of clumpy and has all those beautifully aggregated pieces in it. It can take up to 9 years, depending on the severity of the degradation.
Yeah, so of course, keep minimizing the use of chemicals and keep increasing your regenerative farming, and that's how slowly you will reach there.
Yes, exactly. And, in some ways it can be less work, in the sense of, once you've got a good cover crop, and then if you use a no-till drill, I'm talking now about larger farming operations, but the same applies to even a small backyard garden. You just don't have any open soil anywhere. And, it's always covered, either mulched or a cover crop, or both. And then just make a slit in the ground and have the seeds, go in, and then just cover it back up. And that's now possible on a very large scale. Actually, these no-till drills that just make kind of a slit in the ground, and then they also have the capability of plunking the seed in and covering it over, all in one motion. These no-till drills actually were invented in Saskatchewan, and they're being used more and more. And in a way, it's a labor-saving thing. You don't have to, in the olden days, now I wouldn't say the olden days because some people are still doing it, but in the heavy tillage approach to farming, you've got to till it. Sometimes you have to till it twice, and then you've got to, plant it. And it's just a lot more passes and a lot more cost for the chemical fertilizers, and herbicides and pesticides, because if you open up the soil like that, then it's like inviting weeds, as in plants you don't want there, to enter into the ecosystem.
So I understand that herbicides and pesticides are not good for the soil, but maybe I'm not getting it. For my own knowledge, how does tillage create problem in the soil?
Okay. Well, it destroys the microbial network. So maybe some of your listeners will have seen these images of, there's the tree and the plants above the ground, and then underground, it's almost like the tip of an iceberg. There's just these incredible microbial networks that, sequester carbon, and they actually can, what's the word I'm looking for, absorb and chemical inputs, even to some extent, and so that they're not indefinitely in the soil. So tilled soil is that's then chemical input put in it. There's no microbial activity to be able to incorporate those into the system. So that means then they end up staying in there, and then building up, because, you do it one year, then you do the next year. And so all of that builds up. So it's really about all that underground, wonderful, activity, and that when there's lots of microbial activity, so all these little roots, systems, and they're all connected. And, some people feel, scientists have proven that there is a form of communication going on between, through those microbial networks. So if you, destroy those, it's just the above ground portion is the plant, the tree is just only a shadow of what it could be.
So maybe it's just ignorance that people don't know that tillage is not good for their
Yes.
soil and they do it. Yeah, and they should avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see, on my feed, on my Instagram, I see, quite a few organic farmers because the algorithm, feeds me, stuff about regenerative farming, but also about organic farming. And the distinction being that, for one thing, organic farming, you have to be certified, right? Which is quite a complicated and time consuming and sort of bureaucratic process that a lot of people find like they just decide not to do it. But also, organic farmers' biggest challenge is weed suppression, right? And so there tends to be quite a bit of tillage in organic farming. And that's changing too, as people learn more about it. Like the head of the Organic Council of Canada, no, COG, Canadian Organic Council, like they're starting to really use the word regenerative when they use the word organic. For one thing, regenerative is like sort of a bigger umbrella, and it's easier to convince. I've been told this, that easier to convince farmers to do regenerative, whereas the word organic has a lot of kind of baggage connected to it, where people think it's, impractical and it's kind of hippy dippy, it's sort of airy fairy. And so in my feed, I see these images of, farmers, organic farmers speaking about, their wonderful produce and that, using no chemical pesticides and how terrible they are. But then the images behind them, this is not just a one-off. Quite frequently, I see a lot of tillage, like between the rows. Like, I know they think it looks beautiful. And I used to think that too, the beautiful earth, churned up like that in between these rows of magnificent green plants. But really, those rows need to be, mulched, with rows, it could be wood chips, straw, whatever. But that's just like not sequestering any carbon for one thing. And inviting weeds. And then so you see some organic farmers, I'm not trash talking organic farmers, are doing wonderful work, but I think there's room for improvement in some cases where a fair number of organic farmers use the big sheets of plastic, right, to suppress the weeds. And I know that there are now sort of a new generation of plastics that aren't quite so bad, but in the very recent past, it was like black, because black is best for suppressing what might want to grow underneath it. And obviously from an environmental perspective, in terms of carbon footprint, that's not anything to be the ideal situation. So there's it's changing, but I think that's where the word regenerative can be useful.
Yeah. So those plastic and black sheets are also not good, right?
Yeah, I don't believe they are, in the sense that, and I know some people might push back and go, oh yeah, but it's better plastic now. I've forgotten is it PCVs or something? It doesn't have like the worst element of plastic. I am not up on my sort of plastic science, but just the fact that plastic would need to be manufactured and shipped, and even if it eventually biodegrades, there's still going to be some microplastics going on.
That's
and
right.
Of course,
plastic cannot be plastic free.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So of course, microplastics are
yeah
a big problem in terms of humans ingesting them, even if they aren't aware they're ingesting them, obviously. And so there's been some great work. There is some great work being done, though, in terms of creating materials out of like mycelium, like mushroom fungi based material, in some cases can replace plastic. So there's it's an exciting time to be alive, actually. I'm glad I've lived long enough to see these positive changes and how they're being able to gather up huge swaths of plastic from the oceans and are finding ways to curtail the amount of plastic in the ocean before it gets a chance to break down into microplastics. So again, I'm not given to, flights of fancy and what would you say, like unsubstantiated optimism. But again, I think in these days when there's, lots of bad news going on so many fronts, that it's important to have some optimism, as long as it's founded in reality, which all of this is, I firmly believe, because otherwise people can get, apathetic and just go, oh, what's the point? I'm just going to, sit on my couch and, whatever, just do nothing productive or not even try to make a change. So that optimism factor is important. And, some of the powers that be, that in, my books would be negative forces in the world today, like they're not counting on, but they're hoping that people will be apathetic, right? Because then it feeds into them, remaining, being able to maintain the status quo, the patriarchal systems and the hierarchical power systems that I think, again, glad I've lived long enough to see it, are really starting to change. Like so many more people are going, wait a minute, this just isn't working. We need a different approach. Some people are calling it a return or a rise of matriarchal or matrilineal structures. And that's not, sometimes people think that means kicking the men out and, replacing them with women. It's actually not that at all. It's about a balance of the feminine and the masculine, and systems that are more circular and more inclusive, and community building approaches, which are always have been and still are associated with the feminine. So that's, important work. And I'm encouraged by the number of women, again, my Instagram feed, young women. I mean, I'm 70, right? So young is, a relative term. So anybody under 40, I consider young. But anyway, women younger than I who are just becoming aware of the whole kind of idea of matriarchy and matrilineal societies, and going, oh my God, it used to be like this. Like the patriarchy hasn't always been like this. I mean, the world doesn't have to be, the way it's been being presently presented. And I find that very encouraging, for sure. Like, I think we're on the cusp of some really big change. And, unfortunately, it's going to mean some structures. I mean, it's unfortunate because there will be collateral damage, unfortunately, but as in, loss of human life, I think even really we're at that point in terms of wars and, extreme weather conditions, but that it's almost like some necessary phase or cycle to, reach the next level of human evolution.
Friends, Dale talked about the positive optimism, which isn't just a feeling, it's a commitment to regenerative action. We're going to pause here for part 1, but we are just getting started. In part 2, Dale and I will discuss how composting from your small backyard win to big farms is the key to reforming our soil. Stay tuned for part 2 coming up very soon. And if you found Dale's mission as inspiring as I did, please like, subscribe, and follow the Waste Talk series. Most importantly, share this video with the other passionate, like-minded people in your life. Let's spread the word that saving our soil is possible. We'll see you in the next part.